Good night, sweet child. Oh, and please, no voodoo. Cringeman, I am worried that tonight the child will do more voodoo.
We've done everything we can, Stressica. It is in God's hands now.
Wow, I wish there was a way I could do voodoo.
Hi, I'm Nerdy. You might remember me from that one dream you had as a child. This is part 2 of my series where I'll cover every class in the Conquest of Azeroth Alpha. Exciting! Today, we're looking at Ass. That was nice. Today we're also looking at Witch Doctor. It turns out Voodoo is not just a terrible streaming platform, it's also a fantastic tool for laying the smackdown on your foes and kissing your homies' wounds away. Let's take a peek inside. Invocations. Wow, what a great word. These are the backbone of the Witch Doctor's playstyle. Witch Doctor is a flexible class when it comes to role performance, and unlike myself in the bedroom, uses invocations to ensure that these roles are performed well. There are 4 different Loa, each with unique buffs: Bwansamdi, Seratus, Harik, and Bethek. There are several Witch Doctor abilities that will invoke a particular Loa when used. Whenever a Loa is invoked, the Witch Doctor will gain a stack of that particular Loa's buff, and will lose all other, if any, stacks of any other Loa's buffs. If the Witch Doctor invokes a Loa that the Witch Doctor already has at least one stack of that Loa's buff, then it will trigger a short yet powerful appeasement effect. Through managing Loa invocations and proper timing of appeasement activations, the Witch Doctor can adapt quite quickly to emergent situations and change roles accordingly. Alright, so now I'll go through each ability that triggers a Loa invocation and explain exactly how they work. Hex of Blood is first up on the list, and this is currently our only ability that invokes the Loa Harik. You get it very early on. It's a 30-yard range, 4-second cooldown spell that applies a dot called Hex of Blood that deals shadow damage every second for 9 seconds, as well as giving 2 stacks of Harik's invocation buff. Because this is giving us 2 stacks each time that we cast Hex of Blood, it will also trigger an appeasement of Harik. I'm not sure if this is a bug or intended. Either way, what this appeasement of Harik does is cause our Hex of Blood to also apply a second random hex to the target. It also seems that there is a chance for 2 extra hexes to be applied, for a total of 3 hexes at once. Once again, I don't know if this is a bug or not. There are 5 different hexes that can be applied by an appeasement of Harik, and these are Death, Shrinking, Lethargy, Night, and Blood. Hex of Death does low shadow damage every second and lasts for 14 seconds. Hex of Shrinking reduces the target's damage dealt by 3% per stack, up to a total of 3 stacks and 9% reduced damage dealt. This lasts for 9 seconds. Hex of Lethargy reduces the target's movement speed by 15%, attack speed by 5%, and resource costs are increased by 10%. Hex of Night reduces healing taken by 50%, reduces dodge chance by 100%, and the target is silenced for 5 seconds every 10 seconds. Once at the 10-second mark when the dot is half expired, and once when it finally expires, and it lasts for 20 seconds. And finally, Hex of Blood does high shadow damage every second, but it will heal the affected target whenever it expires, so you must refresh it to prevent it from healing the enemy whenever it wears off. Up next we have Shadow Bite, which represents the Loa Bethek. Shadow Bite is a melee ability which does 100% weapon damage plus a small set amount. It grants 1 stack of Invocation of Bethek and consumes all hexes on the target, which deals a scaling amount of shadow damage based on the number of hexes consumed. So let's say I have 1 hex on my target and I use Shadow Bite. We can see it does physical damage as well as 1 hit of shadow damage. It is also important to note that the remaining duration of hexes does not affect the shadow damage portion of Shadow Bite. If a hex has 8 seconds remaining or 1 second remaining, it doesn't matter. And because of this, it might be best to wait for the hexes to either deal their damage or serve their purpose for some time before consuming them. Consuming Hex of Blood with Shadow Bite will not trigger the healing effect of Hex of Blood. Panther's Pounce is a movement ability with a 5 to 30 yard range and a 15-second cooldown that allows the Witch Doctor to charge to either an enemy target or a friendly target. It also grants 1 stack of Invocation of Bethek. Voodoo Serpent Beam might sound like a Lady Gaga concept album, but I assure you it probably is not. Voodoo Serpent Beam is a 30-yard range, 3-second cooldown channeled ability that lasts for 8 seconds that does nature damage every 1 second to enemies. It can also be used on a friendly target, including yourself, during which it will heal every second instead. The spell will grant 1 stack of Invocation of Serratus every time that it is cast, not every time that it ticks. Hex of Shrinking is a 30-yard range, 4-second cooldown ability just like Hex of Blood, but they do not share a cooldown. It will apply 1 stack of the Shrinking Hex, which we covered earlier, and it will also apply 1 stack of the Invocation of Bonsam debuff to the Witch Doctor. Reclaim Soul is a 30-yard range, decently high mana cost ability with a 2-second cast and a 15-minute cooldown that can be used in combat to resurrect another player. It will apply 1 stack of the Invocation of Bonsam debuff. Alright, and that covers every ability we currently have that will invoke a Loa. And the reason that this is the main focus of our video so far, and that I'm not just going through all the abilities in the order that you unlock them, is that these invocations really are very core to how you play a Witch Doctor. If you don't understand these abilities and you invoke the wrong Loa at the wrong time, you could lose all the stacks of your Loa invocations by swapping to a different Loa by mistake. And this can cost you the fight in PvP and could also spell disaster for your group if you're in a dungeon or a raid. Alright, now that I've gone over which abilities will make or break a Witch Doctor, let's look at what I like to call the non-invoking abilities in our kit. These are also important because these will not interfere with any stacks of invocation that the Witch Doctor currently has, and are therefore able to be used freely at any time without drastically affecting momentum nor rotation. So first up, you start the game with it is Voodoo Bolt. Voodoo Bolt does great damage for a short cast, and it doesn't do anything else. Serpent Ward is another early game ability that is already very iconic of the class. It's a 30-yard range, low mana cost ability with an 8-second cooldown. This ability does not trigger the global cooldown, thankfully, because this ability would feel very bad otherwise. It will summon a stationary guardian similar to a Shaman's Totem in Retail WoW. The Serpent Ward will attack enemies within about 20 yards, as well as I can tell from estimation. It appears to fire every 3 seconds at enemies and does fire damage. There does not appear to be a projectile, but line of sight is necessary. The Serpent Ward will last for 25 seconds, and since the ability has only an 8-second cooldown, it is not very difficult to upkeep several Serpent Wards at once. It is possible for the Serpent Ward to parry an enemy melee attack, and if this does happen, it will instantly perform another attack just like a monster would had it been parried. It is possible for players to target the Serpent Ward and both damage and heal them. Because of this, it is also possible to cast Panther's Pounce on a Serpent Ward. The possibilities of this particular interaction are worth exploring to any aspiring Witch Doctor. Hex is another spell here that might benefit from a different name. Hex is not to be confused with Hex of Blood or Hex of Shrinking. It is a 30-yard range, 10-second cooldown instant cast spell that will fling a nature-flavored projectile at the enemy, dealing about as much nature damage as a Voodoo Bolt, as well as extending the duration of all Hex debuffs currently on the enemy target by 5 seconds. Juju Burst is an instant cast area of effect ability with a 10-yard radius and a 5-second cooldown. It will deal a light amount of shadow damage to all enemies within a 10-yard radius, as well as extending the duration of all Hex debuffs currently on the enemy target by 5 seconds. With Hex of Blood, Hex, and Juju Burst, the Witch Doctor is able to play a juggling minigame with every mob that they fight, and attempt to stack as many different Hex debuffs on their enemy as possible. Potion Toss is a unique ability that by itself does nothing, but the Witch Doctor also has ingredient abilities that will cause its effect to change. Right now, due to increasing gun control laws, we only have access to one ingredient ability, and that is Ingredient Frog Venom. Ingredient Frog Venom is an instant cast, 0 cost, 0 cooldown ability that will apply a 30-second buff to the Witch Doctor. It has the same name as the ability. Now that we have our ingredient buff, our Potion Toss ability is loaded and we can use it to fire. If we use Potion Toss on an enemy, it will apply a 15-second long debuff that will deal moderate nature damage every 3 seconds for the duration. If we use Potion Toss on a friendly target, it will apply a 15-second long buff that will heal every 3 seconds for the duration. Whether Potion Toss is used on an enemy or a friendly target, it will also consume our ingredient buff. Fortunately for us, Potion Toss is not on the GCD, which makes it very macro-friendly. Here I have a simple macro that will automatically reload my ingredient frog poison buff. Likewise, I have one for healing myself. And finally, I have one here that will cast Hex of Blood, Potion Toss, and start casting Voodoo Bolt all at once, and it's great for openers in PvE and PvP alike. Voodoo Puddle is an ability with a 40-yard range, average mana cost, and a 12-second cooldown that, just like my gaming chair sores, will create a puddle of noxious green discharge that lasts for about 12 seconds. It can be cast at a target or cast with no target to place it at your feet. Be warned though, if you do cast it at a target, that it has a rather slow projectile speed. Other than that, it's a very straightforward ability that will cause nature damage every 1 second to enemies, or will cause healing every 1 second to friendly targets. All Cure Elixir is a 40-yard range ability with an average mana cost and no cooldown. It will remove all poison, disease, and curse effects on the target, as well as providing them with 2 seconds of immunity to the aforementioned effects. Important to note is that this cannot remove magic debuffs or bleeds. Strange Elixir is a straightforward spell that can have some pretty interesting effects. It's a 1.5 second cast, 40-yard range spell with an average mana cost and no cooldown. It will heal the target for a small amount of healing and apply a random 10-second long buff to the target. Here's a list of different buffs you can get. So there we have 24 different buffs that I have personally counted, ranging from effects like 2% increased health regeneration, which likely won't turn battles, to beefier ones like 10% crit chance, 20% movement speed, or just 15% increased damage done in a particular spell school. There's some good and some bad here, really some great and some bad, because it feels awesome when it goes in your favor, but the truth is, the majority of the time there's simply too many different buffs on the possible list for it to be reliably useful in a directly intentional way. In a practical sense, it ends up just being a handy little extra added bonus whenever I do need to squeeze off a heal in PvP. Voodoo Alchemy is Witch Doctor's 30-minute buff. It gives a 5% reduction in the cost of abilities, which is important, but not really noticeable. Finally, we have Gift of the Loa, which is a 40-yard range, average mana cost, 20-second cooldown ability that will heal the target for a pretty hefty chunk, as well as applying an appeasement buff to the target based on your current Loa invocation. Also, if you do not have any invocation buff, there will be no secondary effect when casting Gift of the Loa on your target. And lastly, we have Army of the Loa, which is a huge group utility spell. It'll cast Gift of the Loa on every party member within 40 yards, give them a 10-second long 20% movement speed buff, and make them immune to fear for the duration. Since it is casting Gift of the Loa on every party member, that means they will get the effect of your appeasement buff if you do have an invocation active. That is particularly pretty strong. And so that is everything we've got access to so far at level 30. I had a lot of fun leveling the Witch Doctor, and I'm super excited to see how the Shadow Hunter tree especially is going to develop from here onwards. So thanks for watching, and I've already begun making my third video. Next time I'll be doing a core kit showcase for the Knight of Zoroth.